It's 1 p.m. That means you have joined us for Let's Talk Justice. I am Jade Williams, Policy and Advocacy Specialist at Jamaicans for Justice. As you'll see, the camera is set on me alone today, as it was on Mikkel alone last week. As she won't be joining me this week, she has taken some time away from the desk. So I'm here holding down the fort for this episode of Let's Talk Justice. So welcome to everyone, and I hope we're all having a great Tuesday. I'm trying my best to be as perky as possible, but I'm quite tired. It's been a long couple of days, and it's only Tuesday, so we can just imagine what's been going on at Jamaicans for Justice. But welcome to the show. And before we get into the substantive topic, we do have a few things coming out of last week that we would like to highlight. First things first, we have a new police commissioner. So Dr. Kevin Blake was appointed as the police commissioner to take over from Major General Anthony Anderson, whose contract would have ended a few days before. So his official duties have started yesterday, and Jamaicans for Justice would have put out a release on his assumption of duties, hoping that he will focus on human rights policing, as well as some of those recommendations that we have been making over the years, including the extended use of body cameras. So we are hoping to hear some more from Dr. Blake about his plans in his new post as police commissioner. We also would have gotten some correspondence from the Ministry of Culture, Gender and Sport in response to an inquiry we made on the Joint Select Committee that is to be reviewing the Domestic Violence Act. It's something that we have been waiting on, and we are pleased to note that that review should start tomorrow. So the first sitting of the Joint Select Committee to review that act should be, according to the minister, tomorrow, March 20th. So we look forward to seeing that committee start. And like we have in the past, JFJ will be making our recommendations to the Joint Select Committee along with our partners. Now, one final thing I wanted to talk about before we get into the topic for today is yesterday, Jamaicans for Justice would have held its Child Diversion Stakeholder Summit at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel. We were joined by more than 50 CBOs and NGOs, all interested in the issue of child diversion. We were partnering with the Ministry of Justice, and we had Venicia Clark, who is the director of the Child Diversion Unit, as well as Jonah Lee Robertson, who is the acting director of the Restorative Justice Unit. And it was a great engagement. I think we've definitely opened up some avenues for future partnership, and we look forward to strengthening those roads as we go along. Now, before I go into what our substantive topic is, which is striking the rights balance, implications of the 2024-2025 budget for pensioners and the most vulnerable. And we'll be joined by Mr. Keenan Falconer, who is an economist, and Dr. Dennis Chung, who is a chartered accountant and a financial commentator. We do have our Did You Know / Rights of the Day for today, which comes from our Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act, Section 17, and speaks to the duty of care. Now, in that section, it states that every director and officer of a public body shall, in the exercise of his powers and the performance of his duties, 1, act honestly and in good faith and in the best interest of that public body, and to exercise care, diligence, and skill that a reasonably prudent person would exercise in comparable circumstances, including but not limited to general knowledge and experience of that director or officer. So that is a duty that a director or officer of a public body must endure. Now, we also have a trivia question for today, super simple, and that is: in what year did the Honorable Dr. Nigel Clark take up the post of Minister of Finance? So you can respond to that at 2397583, or you can respond on our Instagram pages. So as I would have said, today's topic focuses on the budget, and we are looking at it from that perspective of pensioners and vulnerable groups. Now, on March 12th, 2024, so that was last week, Tuesday, Minister of Finance Honorable Dr. Nigel Clark opened the debates on the 2024-2025 national budget. Now, at JFJ, we've always held that the budget serves as a vital tool for persons to uphold the social and economic rights that we have in our society. And this would be through careful allocation of resources and prioritization of initiatives that promote equality, alleviate poverty, and ensure access to essential services, including education and healthcare and social protection services. So this has become even more important in our context here in Jamaica, as social protection and education policies have been repeatedly emphasized as critical components for achieving economic stability, but also reducing crime, which we know is an issue that we have been struggling with. Now, some notable proposals coming from the presentation include a $20,000 tax credit for Jamaicans earning under $3 million, a $200,000 increase on the income tax threshold, an exemption for pensioners, and in addition to all of this, a proposal for unemployment insurance that would be supported by a loan from the World Bank. Now, these are all very complicated concepts for a person like myself here. I know very little about finance and the economy, so I will be joined, as I said, by Mr. Keenan Falconer, who is an economist, and Dr. Dennis Chung, who is a chartered accountant and a financial commentator. Now, at the end of this discussion, we will also be joined by Ms. Tamara Anderson, and we will be switching gears a little bit to discuss child diversion and her experience as a parent who would have gone through the program with her child successfully. So, we will start with that discussion on the budget, and I believe we are now joined by our two guests, Mr. Falconer and Dr. Chung.
Yeah, but I'm here, but it's not Dr. Chung, it's just Mr.
All right, understood.
Yeah.
All right, so thank you both for joining me. And I think I'll start with Mr. Falconer. I have been seeing the budget debate, engaging with it actively for maybe the past 3 years. And I have to ask, why should the average Jamaican be interested in this conversation? Because I think we feel very removed from it when it happens in Parliament.
Well, the budget debate is always critically important because whether the measures are specifically targeted to different groups of people, in the end, every bit of expenditure affects us. You're talking about the fact that everybody in the country pays taxes, and when you look at the sheer magnitude of tax revenues, it amounts to $1 trillion. This is our money. Whether you pay GCT or income tax or any other tax, we want to know how is it spent. What is it being spent on, and the benefit that it will accrue, if not to me, to other people. So in Parliament, it might seem a little bit esoteric, probably abstract at times, but in the discussions, hopefully, like these and radio interviews and other fora where persons can probably break it down for persons to understand a little bit more, that's where you kind of add a little bit of texture to what is happening so that more and more persons can really visualize what's happening.
Yes, I have to agree with that. Mr. Chung.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, we looked at some of the proposals that have been made. We looked at some of the presentation. And one of the things that came out was the tax credit. I have no idea what that means. So if you could just explain that concept for me first, and then we'll talk about what the actual proposal would mean.
Yeah, so a tax credit is just, the tax department saying, you paid X amount, say you paid $100, and we're going to give you like $20 in credit. Now, how I expect the credit to work, because I don't have the details. When they said cash credit, I think it was just, putting some words on something. But I think what's going to happen is that if you do a like normal, you do a tax return, for example, and you're liable for $100 tax, they will say you qualify for a $20 credit. So you can set aside the $20 against the $100 tax that you're supposed to pay, and then you'll just pay $80 instead of $100. So it's really just saying to you, it's like a discount. That's what it is. It's like a discount on a price.
Okay. So with the proposal that we got from the Ministry of Finance, is this something that will be applicable to all Jamaicans, or how will it apply?
All Jamaicans who pay tax.
Okay.
So you have to be on the tax roll in order to qualify for it.
Okay, so being on the tax roll means that you would have registered.
You pay tax, right? You pay tax, right, and you file your taxes and everything, whether through your employees or through employment, or you file it yourself as a self-employed person.
Okay, so Mr. Falconer, what do you think of the tax credit proposal? How do you think it will impact our Jamaican citizens?
Well, it's a good, for, I guess, want of a better word, it's a nice stimulus, because each person gets $20,000. If you're earning below $3 million, we can see that it's a measure that is targeted particularly to those at the lower end of the scale. And in that regard, it's always a good policy to have shifted your give back to that segment of persons. And the overall cost, if you're looking at the macro impact, it's going to be around 11.4 billion. That's a very sizable amount. But in terms of equity considerations, we're looking at the measures that are specifically targeted to that segment of, I think it was 600,000 persons, each receiving 20,000. That is, when you think of the sheer scale of that number of persons, that's a fifth of the entire population. And if you want to reach as many people as possible, then this is really the way to go. I think it was a creative way. I think the way in which it would be implemented, you have to look at both short-term and long-term measures. Longer-term measures are things like the unemployment insurance that will take some time to really develop. But you want persons to get cash in their hand as soon as possible. And for that reason, I think persons may end up getting a lump sum of this 20,000, and you drag it out and they get it a year down the line. So when you're designing these types of give back measures, I think this one really meets the criteria.
Thank you for that perspective. We're going to take the break now, but when we come back, I do want us to touch on that unemployment insurance from both of you, and your perspective on how that will be implemented and what that will look like for us. So we'll take the break now. Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We have been discussing the implications of the 2024-2025 budget for the most vulnerable, and we are joined by Mr. Keenan Falconer and Mr. Dennis Chung. Before the break, I prompted you both that I'd want to ask about that unemployment insurance proposal that we heard. Should I be alerting my vendor friends that unemployment insurance is coming? How is this going to be applied to our citizenry, and who will benefit from it? And I'll ask Mr. Chung to start, and then I'll ask Mr.
Go. Can you repeat that for me? Who would what? That's the question. Yes,
I asked who would benefit from it.
Unemployment insurance?
Yes.
Oh, it would everyone who is again on the tax roll, right? Because obviously you don't expect that you're not going to be paying tax to the government, and you benefit and you don't contribute. So it would be everyone who is actually on the tax roll that the government has records for, that has been, filing that, whether through an employer or again as a self-employed, that they have a wage, right, or income. Then how it would work is that, say you have an income of $100 and someone has an income of $200, then it might work out that the person who has an income of $200 and pays actually more taxes might get more in benefits. I expect we're going to be for a defined period, though. So maybe they might say, well, we'll pay unemployment benefits for 3 months if you're out of work for 3 months. Once you go back to work, of course, it stops. But it's for a defined period of time. So I expect it to be worked like that. So it basically, I am hoping that it replaces redundancy, because I don't think that you would want to have redundancy and unemployment insurance at the same time, because then you wouldn't be getting the advantage of unemployment insurance, really. But it really works like, currently what you do, you give money to the NIS, and at the end of the NIS, you actually get a pension. This is just saying that you'll put money into like a pool, like the NIS, where there's money put by the employer, the employee, or government. And, when you are not working, when it's recorded that you're not working, then you can apply for the unemployment insurance. And, of course, you have to prove that you're not working to get it.
Was there any indication as to exactly how this will be implemented? Because when I think about, is it that is there a period that I should have been recently paying into the NIS, or could I have been paying into it however long, whatever period of life that I was paying into it? Am I still eligible? Was that discussed?
No, but what the minister did say is that the government would seed it. They would start with the initial contribution into it. As to who would qualify starting initially, I don't know how it would work, but I guess that if they start by seeding it, it is people who are actually on the employment now, on the payroll taxes now. So, once you can show it from now, that you have been on it. I don't know how long you have to be on it, and you have been paying taxes, then, I suspect you'll benefit from it. I suspect there'll be a period of time that you would have had to been working for it to chip in.
All right, thank you for that. Mr. Falconer, in relation to this unemployment insurance, if it is that, for example, well, actually, the question I want to ask is, we have a large percentage of informal persons in our workforce. And based on my reading of the budget presentation and what I would have heard in the debate in Parliament, it's unclear to me how many of these proposals really benefit those persons who are in that informal employment bracket. Can you think of anything that came out of the presentation that might fill those gaps?
Well, I mean, each of the measures that were announced are going to, in some way, affect even those who are informally employed, because when we think about informal employment, we think about persons who don't pay income tax, for example. And so that's why raising the threshold would not have affected around 70% of the persons who are working. But everybody pays tax in some form, even if it's GCT. So even the persons who are getting the $20,000 credit, even some of the persons who stand to benefit from unemployment insurance, the minister had said specifically that it's not going to be like another payroll deduction. You associate, you're getting your payroll, your pay slip, and you see all your deductions. We tend to associate that with formal employment. So in expanding the reach of an unemployment insurance scheme, and feasibility studies have been done, people tend to think, it's just for persons who are in a job. But the minister has indicated really that it's not only supposed to be limited to those persons. So we don't know the exact parameters of the scheme, but we can infer based on what the minister has said that it's the whole intent is not for it to just be persons who are on formal employment and can track payroll, for example. You want to be able to cover a wider range of persons, and I think on that basis, the model that would be used would be government continuing to put money in such a scheme. As Dennis pointed out, the government is going to seed it in the initial stages, and then later on we'll find out where the sources of funding to continue the scheme for a couple of years will come from.
Well, thank you for that. I am glad you mentioned the income tax threshold. I want to understand what that means as a person that pays income tax. Who will that threshold change really affect, and what does it even mean? Is it that I'm going to be paying less taxes and I'll have more money in my pocket, or what does it mean? Well, and that's to you again, Mr. Falconer.
Well, so what the tax threshold moving to 1.7 million has done, it has now removed an additional 25,000 people who will now no longer pay income tax. So they derive the full benefit of it. However, everybody who would have been earning above the previous threshold of 1.5 will now benefit to the extent that they will now save. Well, they will get an additional $50,000 a year, which translates to around $4,200 a month. So that is how you quantify that benefit. It costs the government $8.9 billion. And that is the overall explanation for the tax threshold. For pensioners, it's a bit different. Their threshold was around 80,000. It has been raised to 250,000. So now the first 250,000 of their pension contributions will now not be taxed. So that is now additional money in their pocket as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a great move for the pensioners in particular. I don't know what Mr. Chung thinks about it.
No, I agree with Keenan. I think it's definitely a good move for both the persons, for everyone benefiting from the increase in the tax threshold, and also the move to benefit the pensioners even more. With the announcement, read the pensioners, because they'll see a significant jump also. I think it's a great move. At the end of the day, what we have to remember, though, is that while all of this money is being given back to people, we have to make sure that they secure it in real terms, meaning that they don't lose the spending power. And therefore, the other things that the minister spoke about in terms of the infrastructure improvements and all of those things to improve productivity is going to be very important, because we need to safeguard the real terms, the value of the money.
If you could just explain that little productivity point for me. I read, I think a coverage in some major newspaper in relation to your comments on that. So just for our listeners, what is the concern from your end? The concern reproductivity is just that, let us say that you're producing 100 units of something, and you're earning $100, right? So for each unit there's $1. But if you increase the amount of money in the economy to $150, right, and you're still producing 100 units, it means that to each unit there's now $1.50. So it means that the demand goes up, because people now will be demanding 50% more of the product, right? Mm-hmm. But you're not producing 50% more. So that essentially is productivity. So what I'm saying is that you don't want people to be getting more money in their hands. The same amount of goods are out there, right? Mm-hmm. Which means that we're not producing anymore. And then what happens is that people are demanding more now because they have more money in their hands, and then prices start going up from a demand and supply perspective. So that really is what we need to safeguard against, because that really is a problem the country has faced for many decades, which is why our dollar is now trading at 156 to 1, in relation to the U.S., because the U.S. hasn't been maintaining or increasing its productivity. Ours is declining.
So the value of our currency goes down, and it means that it affects inflation, because anything that we buy now, instead of buying it at 50 to 1, as it was years ago in the 80s, now we're buying it at 156 to 1, which means we have to spend more Jamaican dollars for it. And that really is the impact of productivity.
Thank you for that explanation. I think my listeners will find that very enlightening, because I know that inflation is the thing that we are most feeling. Even as I was listening to the presentation, my thought was, I wonder how many of these proposals are going to affect the prices in the supermarket when I go there each month. So I think that is something that is definitely an important point to understand. We're up on another break, but I will ask you both to stay with me just for a little bit after the break. I just want you to give me your final word on the presentation and what was missing from it that you would have liked to have seen. So we'll take the break. Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We have been discussing the 2024-25 budget and its implications for pensioners and the most vulnerable. We are joined by Mr. Keenan Falconer and Mr. Dennis Chung. So I wanted to get from you both, I know you must be having other things to go do. I know Mr. Chung certainly needs to go.
Right. I have about 5 minutes.
Yes, I'll ask you to use that 5 minutes to tell me what you would have wanted to see in the presentation that was not discussed. And I would also like your opinion on how we can keep our government accountable for the things that were promised in the presentation. So, go ahead.
Well, what would I love to have seen? I don't know that there's much. I think maybe I want to see more discussed on the energy and the transportation system. I think those are important. But the truth is that I think between Nigel Clark and Julian Robinson, that they covered the most important areas, and that I think is important to understand why it's important for us to listen to both opposition and government, because we don't expect that one side is going to have all the answers, but when we put everything together, we see a direction of where the leadership generally in the country is going. And I think they both did cover most of the areas that we want to speak about and look at. I expect that when the leader of the opposition and the Prime Minister and the other sectoral debates happen, then you're going to find a lot more details coming out in terms of how our transportation system is going to look, how our transportation policy is going to look, how our energy policy is going to look, things like crime and that sort of thing. So I think I'm pretty satisfied with what has happened so far. And, there's a significant level of maturity in the presentation of the budget presentations this year, between both of them. I'm really happy with the direction that the both of them have gone. As to how we hold people accountable, things like what we're doing now, your program, and we need to, continuously make demands on government, ensure that they set targets and they stick to them, and we hold them accountable for it. So, your program, civil society, private sector organizations, and individuals, in speaking to their individual MPs and ministers, that's how we hold them accountable.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chung, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, man. All right. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
And I'll ask you now, Mr. Falconer, was there anything that you would have liked to see coming out of the presentation that you didn't? And same question, how would we hold our government to account for these promises?
Well, I think it's hard to really say what much more I could expect because, as Dennis said, the debates continue today, Thursday, and next Tuesday. And, you expect from the finance minister more of the finer technical details of fiscal policy, articulating that overarching fiscal policy direction of the government. I would anticipate that more of the specific items of social policy, so things like education, housing, you look at poor relief, you look at health, things like that, will come out now in the debates by the opposition leader as well as the Prime Minister. And then, of course, the debate will be closed next week. And I expect things might be spoken about, such as, the cost of living. Dennis mentioned things like energy, other measures to increase productivity, housing and the other spending and growth-inducing priorities of the government in terms of infrastructure and so on. So those details I expect to come out over the next couple of days. As for the question of holding our leaders accountable, traditional media, social media, you make demands of your elected representatives and ministers of the government through those vehicles and other forums and other participatory stakeholder initiatives and so on, that I think get visibility, particularly for those persons who would not have otherwise had a voice to express these things. This is how you get persons engaged, to make persons feel like they are a part of the governance of the country, because ultimately we all are. And, there's always making representations to Parliament, participating whenever Parliament sits, see what comes up on the legislative agenda, on the policy agenda, and questioning wherever, there are gaps that need to be filled. So it's all about continuous engagement, and the relevant channels would be there for persons to see what's happening both at the policy level and the legislative level.
Do you have any recommendations for how we can maybe more easily grasp some of the information that is being shared? Are there any tools, anything that breaks it down outside of forums like these where we have our interviews? Are you aware of anything of that nature?
It's really hard to say, because it's not just giving people an economics 101. It's just easier when you have persons who can, familiar faces, persons that are visible on social media can break it down. But the Ministry of Finance, as well as the Bank of Jamaica, and their social media pages tend to do a good job. There are social media personalities who also tend to do a good job, like on Finance Twitter and Econ Twitter, and their reach tends to be very, very far. I think that's a good start. And then in recommending specific materials, they would be better able to say, maybe you can go and read here and there, but I know we like the bite-size items to make it easier to digest for everybody. And, even among my own efforts, I try my best to do that where I can. And I think that overall that's a good place to start.
Great. Thank you so much for your perspective, and we hope to have you again on the show to discuss similar matters.
Thank you so much.
That was Mr. Keenan Falconer, and we were just discussing our 2024-2025 budget. So, good discussion, I would say. I have gained some understanding of how our budget works, some of these important proposals that we would have been given. Both Mr. Falconer and Mr. Chung were tagged in our post related to today's show. So if you'd like to follow them to gain some more of their insights, their social medias would be tagged on our social media, so you can check that out. Now we're about to go into the second piece of the show, where we talk about child diversion. Now this is an area that we have recently undertaken some research in at Jamaicans for Justice, and as I mentioned at the start of the show yesterday, we held our Child Diversion Stakeholder Summit in partnership with the Ministry of Justice. Now today I am joined by Miss Tamara Anderson, who is a parent and as well as a community-based organizer whose child would have gone through the program and has her own lived experience to share. Miss Anderson, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
So for those listeners who are unaware, and I should hope you're not if you're listening to this on Bridge 99. But Child Diversion is a program where a child that is in conflict with the law or is in need of care and protection goes through an alternative system where they will not go through the court process to be able to handle their matter. Now, this alternative system should give them alternative methods such as community service, counseling, and other kinds of support for both the child and the family, for them to be able to rehabilitate. So, Miss Anderson, first things first, what was your experience? How did you come to know about the child diversion program?
All right. So good afternoon again, listeners. Hi, Jade.
Hi.
All right. So child diversion. I am Tamara. I am from, you would call it a volatile community.
Mm-hmm.
As Jade would have said, I am a part of many organizations that do a lot of outreach, especially when it comes to youth. I am the president for the Clarendon Neighborhood Watch, which means I work closely with the police, the CSSB division specifically, because we have a lot of youths in our region that really needs the help. Mm-hmm. However, going through all of this, helping other children, I realized that my child was crying out for help. But the cry that she was making wasn't a cry that, as a mom, I understood. Mm-hmm. What I did, I sought help. I spoke with my officers. I spoke with some members from our community. And of course, they would have referred me to some counselors. Taking her to the station with me to have her do some after-school activities, the officers would have referred me to some after-school programs and mentorship stuff. So I was like, what are these about? So they're like, all right, instead of having her be on the road after school, and so when you're at work, it's easier for her to come here. However, she diverted from that program. She started to stray again, following the friends and doing everything that she was doing. So of course, given that she was already involved with the police, helping them and stuff, and missing out on whatever they had recommended, mm-hmm. they got the child diversion office involved, where child diversion was new to me, mm-hmm. because I had no idea what it was. I knew about CDA, which is CPFSA now.
Yes.
I knew that CDA was here to help with children who maybe the parents, from my understanding, what I thought then, parents couldn't take care of the children, or the children were misbehaving in a certain way that the parents can't get the help or anything. They're not going to school, and CDA would come and take the children. However, going to child diversion, I got a whole different unlook of what this process would have been. This program is set up not to take your child out of the home, mm-hmm. period. That's basically last resort. So me now going in the program, I was so scared because, you know, me I said, Lord God, them are going to take me picking, you know, because she not here. She not abide by the rules of the program or something, so she got over to something else, so see, they're going to take me penny. Mm-hmm. It's nothing like that. And I tell you, the decision that I made to say, yes, I'm seeking the help from you guys, which is child diversion, yes, has helped me so much. My child has rehabilitated. Mm-hmm. She has now learned how to take accountability for her actions. She has learned so many things. I'm not going to talk about the child anymore, not because it says child diversion means that it's based on the child. No. Child diversion focused on me, the mom, who was going through so much. When they call me sometimes and they hear the frustration in my tone, they're like, Miss Anderson, we're here for you. So many days I was flustered, I was frustrated, and I got so angry. And they were there. They counseled me. Mm-hmm. They found out where I was falling short. They helped me to become a better mom. I have 2 other children in-house. Mm-hmm. They provided counseling for my children as well, as young as they are. Daddy got involved with the child, the child on the program, mm-hmm. through child diversion. Yes, he was there providing financial help, but not physical. And we all know that the men think that, hey, because I'm sending them to school, that is all they need. child diversion was what helped my child's father to come to full realization that, listen, financial help alone cannot do this.
All right, Miss Addison, I'm going to ask you to pause there. We're going to take
Sure.
a quick break, and when we come back, I would just want you to give our listeners an idea of the steps that you would have taken from going to speak to the Ministry of Justice, to the Child Diversion Office, to the being at the end of the program and being able to talk about your success now. So we'll take the break, and when we come back, we'll discuss. Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We are in the second half of our program discussing child diversion with Ms. Tamara Anderson. Now, before the break, I wanted you to go through a little bit the steps. If I am a parent who is seeing some behavioral issues with my child, or my child is starting to exhibit or do things that I'm concerned about, what would, in your opinion, should I be doing?
All right, if the child is doing stuff that are out of the bounds of a child.
Mm-hmm.
Say, for example, the child leaves home without your permission. Of course, you wouldn't know where that child is. So, concerned parents would make a gas station, if you go call police, make police come find the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, that's our first response, right? Now, after we do this, or before we do this, we start to consider losing the child, as I was going through before.
Mm-hmm.
The steps that my officers would have given to me would have been something easier,
mm-hmm.
because instead of having CDA get directly involved, what they had recommended was me to go to the office and have them give me a referral.
Mm-hmm.
Go to CDA's office,
Yes.
explain what was happening with the child, and have them give me a referral for the child diversion
Mm-hmm.
Program. When we got to the child diversion, what they did, they spoke with the child, came up with a designated plan, which they followed specifically for the child based on what was happening with her at the time.
Yes.
Now, during that time, they came up with strategical plans, which involved her family, and probably anything else that was involved with her directly, affecting school, family life, social life.
And this is something she had to agree to?
Yes, she had to agree to all of this. All of this was explained.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't talk to her in our big terms that we are using now.
Yes.
Yes, and that's what I loved about the program. They came down to our level. They spoke with us according to how they thought we would understand.
Mm-hmm.
My child is a bit, she's a shy child. She doesn't talk a lot. And I tell you see, when they explained everything to her and asked her what they said, she could tell them exactly what they said in her own words,
Mm-hmm.
so them understand that yes, she know exactly what she's signing to.
Yes.
And that's how she agreed, because she ain't gonna sign unless she agreed.
Yes.
Unless she understand everything what she gonna sign. So they had to find a way to go down, and they did. And after we found the ways how to help her, the program, they gave her like a slated time,
Mm-hmm.
and worked with her accordingly. So in between that time, say for example, they had given us a 6-month time period,
Mm-hmm.
we would have gone through counseling, personal counseling for child,
Mm-hmm.
personal counseling for parents,
Mm-hmm.
single, as in mother alone,
Yes.
father alone, grandmother, and then they did counseling as a unit for the entire family, including children in the household and so on. So yes, after they had come up with the plans, we were still going through everything, but we kept seeing the improvements in the child's behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Her mentor is very happy. She got a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any idea what that would have been or how that would have worked out. Oh, by the way, let me say this first before we're going any further, and I forget. All of this is completely free of cost
Yes.
for parents in Jamaica facing anything at all that they consider a child to be doing out of the way. The counseling is free. The psychiatrists are free. Everything that you go there for is free. You don't pay anything. Right?
Yes.
So back to mentorship now. So she was given a mentor, and of course that mentor would have played a dynamic role, because that mentor would have been slated with the task of probably suggesting some certain things for them to put into the plan, because family had to suggest some stuff as well. And
okay, so they consult you as the family
yes,
members
we're
to see
consulted.
what would be most appropriate.
Right.
Yes.
What we think is best, and how best we think this can help her. If it is that we tried something and it wasn't working according to how we expected it over the time period, then of course we would have moved on to something else. So we didn't stay on any one thing for too long based on her improvements or regression.
Right. Okay.
Right. So yeah. So mentorship was A1. As I said, they were there for me as a single mom. They brought daddy on board through counseling and education, the parental workshops, every single thing.
So now that you are at the end of your program, and you started by saying that your child has improved significantly to the point where you said she is rehabilitated. Now that you are at the end of the program, what, if any, relationship do you and your family have with the office or with any of the mentors or any of the professionals that you would have met over the period?
Listen, when I see them, I hug them up, because me and them are friends. They're my friends. They're my friends anywhere I see them, because I appreciate them so much because of everything that they did and is still doing. I have completed the program. My child is off the program, but I'm still invited to the parental seminar. I'm still invited to basically everywhere that I'm available to go. So yes, they don't just dump you off the program and you're done and that's it. They still keep you close as long as you're available and you want to be a part of the program. You're still there as the adult.
That is awesome. So I appreciate you joining us today, Miss Anderson. I am running out of time, so I'll have to break here. But I do appreciate you joining us and sharing your insight and experience with the Child Diversion Program. It's something that we have been championing as an alternative to some of our more draconian legislation that's coming in place. So we're happy to have first-hand testimony of its success and its benefit. So thanks again for joining us.
You're most welcome.
And that was Ms. Tamara Anderson, who is a community-based organizer and a mother who has first-hand experience with the Child Diversion Program. As I was sitting here in the break, I heard the Ministry of Justice's Child Diversion ad playing over Bridge 99, and it was something that Ms. Clark brought up in her presentation yesterday, that the public education surrounding the program is something that is at the forefront of the ministry's mind. It's something that they are invested in to ensure that more parents like Ms. Anderson are aware of some of these alternative justice system methods that the Ministry of Justice has been championing. And one of the things that JFJ cannot talk about child diversion and not mention is our mandatory minimum sentencing proposals that have been made to the Child Care and Protection Act, as we continue to champion restorative justice and child diversion and alternative dispute resolution. We have to point out that the continuous push for these draconian pieces of legislation that are mandatory sentencing legislation is in contradiction to the support that the ministry has been showing for these alternative methods of rehabilitation and reintegration of children. So we hope that the ministry is keeping aware of how successful this child diversion program has been and be able to implement it in such a way that we can move away from our current legislative framework into something more suited towards rehabilitation. So we do have a trivia winner. We're coming to the end of the show now. And our trivia question for today was, in what year did the Honorable Dr. Nigel Clark become the Minister of Finance? The answer was 2018. And our winner was Da Nihi Liti. These Instagram names are constantly giving me trouble. But to the winner, I will not try to pronounce it once more. I don't want to say anything inappropriate on air. We will reach out to you via DM with your prize. So thank you for participating in this week's trivia. We are at the end of the show. However, reminder to those who were not listening earlier that the Ministry of Gender, Culture and Sport will be doing their first sitting of the Joint Select Committee on the Domestic Violence Act tomorrow. So tune in for that on PBCJ. And the final thing I'll mention in my last minute and a half is that Jamaicans for Justice is hosting its art auction, its annual art auction this year. Again, it is to be held in June 15th. So on June 15th, we will be hosting our art auction. Our tickets are now on sale, so you can reach out to the Jamaicans for Justice offices to purchase your ticket and support the organization's work, and also get some good art and have a nice night out with your friends and family. So we will be at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel on June 15th, celebrating JFJ and celebrating our local artists. So as I said, feel free to reach out. 2397583 is also available via WhatsApp to purchase tickets, so you can reach out there as well. We are at the end of the program. Thank you all for joining us. We will be back next week, and hopefully you will see both your hosts next week. It's been 2 weeks of single people, so hopefully next week it will be both myself and Miss Jackson. I am Jade Williams, and we'll see you again.